You're listening to Parasearch Radio. News, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or their affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Haunted Histories with your host Penny G. Morgan, right here on Parasearch UK Radio.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you're all well. I'd say well, but if you'd seen the amount of people at Parasearch who are down and have been down for the last couple of weeks, I don't know if saying I hope you're well is a good thing to say. If you've got the lurgy, I hope you're feeling better. If you haven't got it yet, like me, let's just hope we don't get it. But on that note, this is the penultimate Haunted History show for 2019. I'm quite surprised that I've got through nearly another year, because I'll be soon heading into my 4th year doing this show, which I must admit, I think in my first year I sort of thought, how am I going to make this last a whole year? How am I going to do a year's worth of shows? And now, the way I'm ideas and everything else that are coming up, I've probably got a good 2 or 3 years worth of shows lined up already, if I really thought about it. So yeah, penultimate Haunted History show. It's quite scary, really, when you think about it. I've been doing it for that long. Hi, Richard. So, what's everyone been up to then, while I'm waffling on for the next 5 minutes? I'm actually halfway through reading Andy Saw's new book called, let me just check the title, 72 Minutes in the Woods. I'm halfway through now. Hi, Pamela. And I can honestly say, and I messaged Andy this today, saying it was not what I expected. And it's a bit weird, and I really wouldn't want to be in his mind, some of the stuff he's come up with in it. But it's definitely... Do you want to just try again, Pamela, do you want to just try again? Try writing it all again. That's probably going to be the easiest thing, isn't it? Oh, dearie me. But anyway, it's halfway through at the moment. I'm going to hopefully be doing a review on it at some point to put on the website to let you know what I think. But yeah, I've read half of it in I started it last night and I've already read half of it, so that probably tells you it's a weird one. Yeah, it's weird, but that isn't an insult. If Andy's listening, he may be listening, he may not. I don't know what he's up to today, but it's definitely worth getting hold of a copy. It's a good one. Hi, Jeanette. Your writing seems to be a bit better than your sister's. Hi, Wes. Unfortunately, Wes, Katrina's not actually in the studio, which I'm going to explain in a minute. But I know she said she was going to come by and sort of check some of the comments and everything at some point when she's got 5 minutes. But you'll hear all about that soon. So, what else have I been up to? Well, it's Christmas plays and everything at schools at the moment, and I've got my youngest son's nativity play tomorrow, and I've already been warned by one of the assistants who saw the dress rehearsal today that I will bawl my eyes out at how cute he looks as an angel and how well he delivers his lines. So that one's going to be good. And then on Friday I'm actually going to be doing a presentation to my older son's year, the year 5s, on Henry VIII. I am. I got to look around, and I am planning my trip to Canada as well. Yes, Wes, I have been planning my trip to Canada. Takes a lot of planning. Yeah, all these things I want to see. And planning, actually, I'm already starting drafting out book 4. Is it book 4 I've started working on? Let me think about this. No, book 5. Yeah, I've got one book out. I've got the other one that's going to be going to editing soon. Then I've got number 3, and then I've got number 4's already started. Yeah, book 5. I've already come up with ideas for book 5 as well. So it's been a busy one, but I am looking forward to seeing my son and his classmates, who I've known for a very long time, their faces when they see me standing there in front of them. It's going to be quite amusing, I think. Although I was lucky enough to go to Newhall School earlier this week. This Bewley Palace, and took loads of brilliant photos. Went to download them onto my computer, and it's corrupted the entire file. So there, you'd probably heard the swearing from Chelmsford. I was not impressed at all. But there you go. These things are sent to try us, aren't they? I'm going to be Googling to see if I can get some of the pictures and borrowing them off that instead of using the ones I actually took, which is a real shame, because I took some quite interesting ones. But anyway, on that note, I know you're not tuning in to listen to me warble. You want to hear the interview. Well, here it is. Okay, now, I've been very excited about doing this. I'm always excited about my interviews, as you know, because I get to speak to some absolutely amazing people. But this lady and I first met, crikey, it's over a year ago now. And we said at the time, we must come on the show together. And I'm so pleased that she's so busy. It's always good to see someone who is, well, let's face it, she's talented, she's beautiful, she's genuine, she's approachable. And she's probably what you'd call the first lady of the lockdown. It's Miss Katrina Weidman. How you doing, Katrina?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. Do you like that little intro?
I did. It was very nice. Yeah, I felt good.
Well, it's true. It's true. You do seem... Well, you are beautiful. You are talented. You do seem very genuine, and you're definitely incredibly approachable. There's no sort of airs and graces.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Is that a conscious effort to be like that?
I don't know how to answer that, because, I mean, I think my parents raised me to be a certain way. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I mean, that influence from them is certainly there. Yeah. I think. But I also I tend to gravitate towards people. That's, you know, I'm not the person normally that's like, oh, I don't want to talk to somebody if I meet them. You know, unless you have one of those days or you're running about trying to get things done and you just, you know, it's one of those days where you just can't deal. But, no, I mean, genuinely, and it's funny because that's kind of how I started, on Paranormal State. That's how I became the interviewer, because I just really naturally gravitated towards wanting to talk to our clients.
Yeah. Well, I do remember when we did the interview at Sage for Parasearch, you actually started asking me questions, which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah.
It was lovely, but it was kind of like, no, I'm interviewing you. So yeah, I know what you mean. When you genuinely like people, you want to find out about them, and it doesn't always matter who they are. If they're interesting, they're interesting. Whether they've got a known story to tell or one that you haven't yet heard. So no, I like that, and I liked how genuine you are when I met you as well. You're very, very sort of no bullshit.
Thank you. Yeah.
But it's good to hear you're busy. I was watching, we've now got Portals to Hell showing in the UK.
Oh, yes. Thursday nights on the Relay channel.
It is. And then you got Help, My House is Haunted afterwards with your friend Chris Fleming and Barry Guy.
Oh, yes.
That's on afterwards. Yep. So I must admit, I don't always get a chance to watch the shows when they're on live, so I tend to record them and then binge them when the kids are at school or whatever. But I was watching one of the Portals to Hell episodes tonight. The hotel in Alaska.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And I was quite pleased with I mean, I didn't know what happened, but I was very pleased when you sort of you came out and said to the hotel owner, actually, I think the story you've been telling about this Alice might not be right.
Yeah.
Because that's one of my bugbears, as you probably know, is when people don't look into a story, they almost assume what the folklore has always said.
Yeah, and a lot of times what happens now, too, I've noticed, since the paranormal is less taboo and more, you know, businesses and residential owners have opened their buildings to paranormal investigators, you there's a lot of people who are very sensitive to this stuff. And I'll be the first to admit I'm very skeptical of a lot of things in the field. And I don't always think there's a nefarious reason behind some people's actions. But I do think there's not a whole lot of objectiveness going on all the time.
Yeah.
And so what I have found being a trend in the last couple of years is when I do an interview with a homeowner, they'll tell me things as if they're fact. Oh, this is where, for example, let's use the story of the Alaskan. This is where Alice was killed. She was, murdered here by her boyfriend, and that happened in the 40s. So I have to go back and I say, well, how do you know that? Is that from a newspaper article, a local legend? Did you meet somebody that knew her? And a lot of times what I'm finding now is people are saying, oh, well, a psychic came in and that's what they felt.
Yeah.
So, that's really such an important distinction to when you're doing your interviews and your tours and everything, to try to weed out where exactly are you getting this information from.
Yeah.
And I don't like to perpetuate anything that's not true.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really hard to get to the bottom of these stories. And some of the stories I'll never get to the bottom of, just because, documentation can be hard to find. Or in the case where we are dealing with a psychic reading, it's very hard to prove or disprove. So, there's a lot of challenges that I think we face in the field.
Yeah. Which is kind of why I do what I do, if I'm honest, Katrina. It's kind of why I try and show people what the history of a place was, and look into, I do an awful lot of research for different groups. When they have something happen to them in a location, I will go away for them afterwards and see if I can, if there is any, if they say I sense someone was killed here in 1941, chances are if someone died in 1941, it will be recorded somewhere, whether it's newspapers, whether it's the death certificates, whether, whether there's an account from someone on a soundbite thing that you can find. They're saying, yeah, I remember living there and they had to take this guy out in a body bag, blah, blah, blah. It's going to be there somewhere. And I think sometimes it's a case of Chinese whispers with stories, that it's kind of like they say, yeah, someone died in this room. So it went from someone just died in there, which isn't uncommon in a hotel. It happened. Yeah. To someone was murdered in this room, to someone was murdered by their husband because he found out they were, I don't know, sleeping with the bellboy or something. I mean, it gets worse and worse and worse. And then it was that they were murdered because they were sleeping with the bellboy who was a demon in disguise or something. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And when you take it back, it's, no, that she had a heart attack. It just happens. So I like that. I was grinning as I was hearing you say that sort of thing. That sounds really patronising. It's not meant to, but I just, it was, I like that. And that's what I mean about you being genuine. You've got an interest in the truth as opposed to what you're told. Yeah. Oh, does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, totally. I am one of the most stubborn people you'll ever meet. I'm a Taurus rising. So, I mean, that's written all over my personality. I have a big thing with, trying to get to the bottom of the real story. Yeah. And again, I go back to what I said earlier. Sometimes it can be really, really hard. And another thing that happens, you have the luxury when you do, when you take on a case away from the cameras, you have the luxury of having time.
Yeah.
So, you could work on a case for a year and you compile everything that you found. With television, we don't have that luxury. So a lot of the cases that I've done for television, you're just getting glimpses or a highlight reel of the investigation. Yeah. And unfortunately, there's a lot of things that come to light after that investigation is done, or they come to light during the investigation, but they get left out for whatever reason. Or, I've had this happen a couple of times where maybe someone didn't give us really 100% correct information, and again, not because they were trying to mislead anyone, just because they didn't have it. And then we find out the correct information later, but you don't want to make that person look bad. So you have to kind of like sidestep it in a way that, isn't derogatory to that person at all.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like challenges that come with that.
Yes.
So it can be really difficult sometimes.
Well, you say you're a Taurus and you're stubborn. I'm a Leo. So, I like to be right all the time.
Oh, yeah. My best friend's a Leo, so I know.
We're cool people. Is she a July, she or he a July or an August Leo?
She is a July Leo.
Oh, good. What date's her birthday?
The 24th.
Oh, 2 days before me, Katrina.
Okay, yeah.
There you go. There you go. Us Leos, we're very cool. We are very cool. We're very caring and very loyal. Very, very true.
Yeah, very true.
But we do like to be right.
We were 4. So.
Oh, that's so cute. But we do like to be right.
Yeah.
I hate getting things wrong. As everyone who knows me will attest to. I kind of. That's why I look up things for so long so I don't get them wrong, and I cross-check everything, and then if I do get something wrong, oh no, don't like it. But so you're talking about research and the fact you don't get as much time to research stuff for the TV shows because they're more sort of quick hitting. What sort of research do you do before? We're going to be talking about Allegheny. Yeah. What sort of research did you do before your first visit there?
Oh gosh, my first visit, it was a lot of reading, a lot of connecting with people I knew in the field who had been there to find out what their experiences were. And Allegheny, I mean, even if you're doing that away from the cameras, Allegheny is a challenge just because of the size and how many different people have come through the doors. And one of the challenges with that, because of the volume, but also, there was a very long time where asylums in America, well, and really, I mean, my experience in the UK has been the same, but there were a lot of things that went on that they didn't want documented.
Yeah.
So, a lot of the things that you hear about that could potentially connect to some sort of paranormal activity as we understand it today, you really have to go back and find the people that work there or were related to the person. And even then, you start going back to some of those asylums that started in the 1800s. Those family members aren't around anymore.
Nope.
So there's a lot of challenges with a place like Allegheny, and unfortunately, a lot of it is more, I think, stories that have been passed down just because of the challenges with the documentation.
Yeah, no, I agree. And obviously in the UK, we do have asylums that predate 1800s, some of them, when you look at the original Bedlam and the Royal Bethlehem as it was known and all those kind of ones. We did have people in institutions from people have always had to be cared for because mental health isn't a new thing. It's just treated a lot. Well, it is treated a lot better than it was now. Still room for improvement, but it's a lot better than it was. So, do you ever go into sort of the records offices of places? Do you ever look at newspapers? Do you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was the big thing with Allegheny the first time I went because Rebecca opened up her, she has like a whole room of different documentation that she has.
Oh,
and,
I would be in heaven.
Yeah, and she's really good. She's really into the history. She was telling us, because all the patients there are still protected from HIPAA laws, and so their information only becomes available. I can't remember the exact year, but like maybe 75 years after their death, 100 years after their death, something like that. So every year a new batch of records will become available to her.
Yeah.
And she'll comb through them and see what she can find. And she said a lot of times she'll find information on people that matches the paranormal experiences that people are having. Or she'll have ghost hunters give her names, and then she'll be able to find those names later.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting, but I think she does a fantastic job at trying to keep up with the documentation because there's a lot.
Oh, I'd love it. I'd love to be looking through stuff like that for all day, every day. It's I think I actually said I had to go into our local records office to do some research for a presentation I was doing to my son's school, the kids in my son's school on World War II, and I spent like 6 hours in the records office looking through old paperwork, and I was happy as you can. I was like a pig in shit. I was so happy. In fact, I had a text from the husband saying, "Are you coming home?" I was like, "Oh, sorry." I was getting carried away. But I find it fascinating when you get that little nugget, that little thing that sort of really appeals to you and just clicks everything into place. So how important do you think having someone who's done the research on a place or is capable of doing it, how important is that to investigators in general, do you think?
Well, I think it's very important because, again, this is another trend I've seen, and there's two sides of it, I think. There's one where, again, when the shows, I think, became really popular, one of the benefits of it was that it was opening up the conversation, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it inspired a lot of people to get involved in the field, which is great.
Yeah.
The drawback was there were a lot of people who were getting involved who, I don't know if they cared as much as maybe they should have, or, there were people who were getting involved just to make a quick buck. There were people getting involved to just for fun and maybe didn't, cross all their T's and dot all their I's.
Yep.
And so, again, we see that pattern of these stories being told that aren't necessarily accurate, but they're being portrayed as accurate. And I think and then again, I go back to something earlier I said and I always try to remind people this, every show I've done, it is just a glimmer of those investigations.
Yeah.
And some of that information that we thought was right at the time isn't right. And it's just really, I think, having that shortened time frame work against you. And I've never met an investigator who is like, yep, that case is done, figured out everything. Because if we could figure out everything, then it wouldn't be the paranormal.
Yes.
So everything is speculation. And I always try to remind people that every single thing we say is speculation. So I think it's really important to have that researcher there, or to have somebody who's really good at, going through with a fine-tooth comb, because that way we can hopefully get the correct information out there.
Sounds like I'll have a job. Sounds like I'll have a job for a little while longer then, Katrina, because that's kind of what I do.
Oh yeah, it's. I mean,
not with you really necessarily, but in general, I'll have stuff to do for a while longer then.
Yeah, it takes a very dedicated personality type, someone who's not overwhelmed easily, to be able to go through that, you also, it's funny because you have to know your history in general too to be able to do it, because you have to understand why certain documentation might be written the way it was. So there's a lot of connecting the dots sometimes that has to be made.
There is, yeah.
So it's hard. It's very hard.
Yeah. So, as this show is called Haunted History, do you have a favourite period of history you love to sort of delve into, or you love it when you get an investigation come up and say, this is the period that we think it relates to?
Yeah, I have a lot of different periods of history that I love. I really, it's hard to pick one.
Give us three then. Top three.
Oh, okay. Renaissance.
Oh, right. Okay.
Late 1600s through the 1700s.
Okay.
And I would say probably 1920s through the 50s.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So are we talking sort of British history, world history?
I think for the Renaissance, definitely European.
Yeah.
I think the colonial age in America was really fascinating.
Yep.
And I think maybe more on a world stage for the 20s through the 50s because of everything that was happening at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I've never had someone say Renaissance before.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You're quite unique with that one. It's quite interesting. That is interesting.
Yeah, I always wanted, in a fantasy, I always think it would be cool to live in that era. And then I think about all the things they didn't have, luxuries-wise. And I don't know if I could do it. But I, when I go to the UK, I love to go on history tours, and I love just learning about that time period over there. And I was a theater major, so Shakespeare was very. His work was definitely something I studied a lot in school. So that whole era, I think is really fascinating.
Brilliant. Well, you do come to the UK quite a lot, don't you?
Yeah. I was just there in August.
Yeah. What is it you like about the UK?
I don't know. It's funny. Ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to go over there. And I remember before I came to the UK, I had never been to Europe before. Wow. And when people were like, oh, if you could go to Europe, where would you go? And I would say London. And they're like, why would you want to go to London? And not because London is bad, but they were just like, it's just like America with accents. And I was like, what?
Really?
I don't think that's
okay.
Yeah. A lot of people say that to me. And I'm like, I don't think that's true.
Americans say that, or British people say that?
It was a little bit of both. I met both people.
All right.
So, but I always just had a pull to it. And, maybe that's partly, I grew up with Disney movies, and so many of those were set in, castle kingdoms, and you just sort of associate, I think, England as an American, you associate England with that more so than other countries. But I don't know. I really always had a pull towards it, and I was so happy the first time I got there. I just soaked it all in, and I really, really, I don't know. There's so much that I loved about the UK.
Well, I do have to remind you, when we met in November, we agreed that when you next got over here, you and I were going to go out. Yeah. We were going to go and see some rock bands, and I was going to take you to a rugby game.
Yes, yeah. Which I'm still down for. I will still be there.
That's all right then. That's all right. I thought you'd snubbed me in the summer, Katrina. I thought, that was me going to teach you the rules of rugby.
No. I was studying at Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts this summer, and it was a boot camp and a half.
RADA, baby.
So, yeah,
RADA.
So it was very intense. Had like zero time.
That's all right. But next time we're going to keep in touch. You do realise that, because I'm going to hold you to it. I'm going to take you out. I mean, we've got loads of rugby people who can help you out here. So I think one of the pulls a lot of people from places like America that have for the UK is the fact we have got, without sounding patronising, we have got a lot of history. And if you do like delving into things, but what I do love about America is because your history is a lot shorter than ours, you take care of things that are, say, 200 years old more than we maybe do. But I see that if I go to some places, I've been to Greece and Rome and in Italy and places like that, and their stuff that's like 1,000 years old, they're a bit like, yeah, you can clamber all over it, don't worry. Whereas in this country, we'd be like, no, don't touch.
Yeah.
So it's I suppose it's, if you've got a proliferation of something, you're a bit like, nah, we don't have to worry about that. Now, what we don't have a proliferation of in the UK anymore is the old, what I'd call almost Victorian asylums. Most of them have been converted into apartments or pulled down, and so investigating them here, it's not really possible. But in the US, you've still got quite a few. And one of them, I think one of the most famous ones is the one we're talking about, is Trans-Allegheny. Now, I'd say most people in the paranormal world have heard of it. Most shows have done a episode from there, because I think you did one with the first series of Portals to Hell as well. Haven't you?
Did?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They haven't shown that yet. They're not showing them in order, because it should have been on last week, I think. But unfortunately, they're not showing them in order. And I was like, that's really inconvenient. Yeah, they could have shown that in the right order for me. But before you went to it with Paranormal Lockdown with Nick Groff, had you ever been there before?
I'd not been there, but I mean, definitely heard about it, definitely read about it, researched it. But a lot of the work I was doing before was residential. So I never really had the opportunity to go to the bigger locations. Yeah. Unless it was an event that we were doing, like a meet and greet type of thing. So that was one of the reasons when Nick asked me to be part of Lockdown, that was something that really attracted me to it, because I had never been to all these bigger places.
Yeah. You went to some amazing places on that series, didn't you?
Yeah, we really did. And it was I think I learned a lot just how different it was working with clients versus, working at a bigger location all the time. So I'd done bigger locations in the past, but not to that volume. And it was interesting to see the differences in activity and, things we would experience firsthand. And so I think I learned a lot. It was a growing experience for me.
So when you knew, somewhere like, this is a conversation I have with a lot of people, is somewhere like when you're going into a place like Trans-Allegheny, which even sounds spooky. The name, I think, is quite a scary name almost.
Yeah.
And you'll have seen pictures of it. I think it's a beautiful looking building, but it does look like something out of a horror film. You know, one of those things that the minute you go behind the doors, all the weird stuff starts happening. Literally. Did you go in there with a clear mind, or did you already have a sort of a level of apprehension and what the hell is going to happen while I'm here?
Yeah, well, I always try to go in with more of a clear mind because the power of suggestion is a real thing.
Yeah.
And so, as investigators, we always want to try to cut that out. But I think it's hard to do that 100% all the time. Yeah. And I think we just need to be transparent about it. It's hard. And Allegheny, especially when I was working with lockdown, we were living there and we were sleeping there. And, we had done that stuff a little bit when I worked with PRS. There were a lot of clients where we would sleep over their houses and things like that. But we honestly always slept in groups for the most part. I can't remember one time where I wasn't sleeping with someone else from the team, just, in case something happened, or, we could have like a witness or somebody to grab a camera if we needed it. So, sleeping alone and very far away from the person you're working with was kind of scary in and of itself. So I think there was that natural kind of fear going into Allegheny of, kind of what you said, like, what is going to happen to us? This is one of the most notoriously haunted places in America, if not the world. And I've known many credible people that have had experiences there. So, what happens when you're alone and you're sleeping and you're vulnerable?
Well, I think you did quite well, to be honest. All the ones I've watched you be on your own in, you actually look braver than Nick, to me. My other half he's only done 2 investigations with me, and he did the one I did last night. He was on, and I said to him, "Well, you're right if I leave you on your own in here while we go off." And he went, "No, I'm not." He said, "You leave me on my own, I'm getting in the car." And I was like, "Oh, okay. You wuss." I've been put on my own in cellars. I've been put on my own in rooms where there's noises that I really can't explain. But yeah, he wouldn't sit in a flying clubhouse on the site of an old US Air Force base. But you do. I think you do pretty well. But I actually think more female investigators on television in general do seem to be less screamy.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's funny, it wasn't always like that. And that was something that really would get under my skin, is that I would see, the screaming and the, and I felt it perpetuated the wrong image of what a female investigator is. Yeah. It kind of leaned into that stereotype of like the screaming woman in the horror movie.
The damsel in distress. Yeah.
Yeah. And, that hasn't been my experience. I've met plenty of women who just honestly kick ass and have no problem staying somewhere by themselves and will, spend as much time as needed until something happens. So, that's always bothered me.
Yeah, I mean, me too.
It's one thing if that's who you naturally are. I don't have it. Like, if somebody is just naturally that way, that's fine. But I think for a while on television, it became like a commodity to have that character, quote unquote, there.
Yeah. I think I've jumped quite a few times when somebody suddenly grabbed my arm and gone, "What?"
Oh, sure.
But I'd be the same if somebody did that in the room and a living person did it. But I wouldn't scream and run away.
Right.
Yeah. They've tried. There's been people who've tried to do that to me. They've tried to lay bets and get Penny scared on an investigation, and you get free investigations with us, and they've not managed it. But yeah, I think I do like that. I do like the fact it's serious. It's not gimmicky. And that's one of the things I like about your style.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But talking about Allegheny, one of the things you did there, which I couldn't have done it, is when you lay on the mortuary slab.
Oh yeah.
That must have stunk in there, didn't it?
It actually didn't smell
Really?
because that building's pretty dilapidated. So there's a lot of broken windows. There's a lot of like air circulation going through. The thing that sucked about it was really, really run down and falling apart.
Yeah.
So as I was laying there was like pieces of rust falling into like my face and my eyes. And there was just like, mouse dirt and little shards of wood and splinters sticking up. And I think it was more like the natural elements of it, really, which was the awful part. Yeah. And it's also, they don't show this in the episode, but so it's a completely separate building. Mm-hmm. So Nick and I are not even, I mean, if something happened to me or something happened to him, even not on a ghost level, but if one of us got hurt,
yeah, we
wouldn't know. Mm. So, there were a lot of things working against us in that episode for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't. It's not the thought of being in the mortuary that bothered me. I'd have quite happily got one of those camp beds you use and lay on one of those in the building. Mm-hmm. It's the confined space. That I couldn't have done it. I really couldn't have done it. I would have had a panic attack.
See, I kind of get into that. When I was a kid, this sounds weird, but when my best friend that I mentioned earlier, sometimes I would just sleep in her closet. I know that's so weird, but there's something about like sleeping.
It was a sign of things to come, Katrina.
Yeah, I don't know. It was like, I was like, oh, this is cozy in here. I'm just going to sleep in here. And honestly, a couple of years ago, my friends got married, and I had no money. And I went down. They had a destination wedding, and I went, and I couldn't afford to get my own room, and so I slept in the closet of my friend's room.
Is this an exclusive for Parasearch?
Yeah, it was just, I needed a little privacy to go to bed because I don't like people watching me, and like I have to put the covers above my head because I don't feel safe unless I do. So
you do, don't you? In all the lockdowns, you bury yourself in the covers.
I do. It's comforting to me. I don't know. Ooh. Maybe it's like a womb thing. Like I want to feel like I'm back in the womb or something. I have no idea.
Oh, Parasearch exclusive, everybody. If you open your wardrobe door, you might find Katrina Weidman in there.
I'm sure there's a psychologist out there right now. Like, oh my God! Like, I need to get this girl some help.
That's brilliant. Well, I did like that, and I do. It does seem to be. I don't know whether mortuaries are actually that active, or it's because it was next to the medical wing, wasn't it? Wasn't it next to where they did the lobotomies? That part.
No. So the medical wing. So they were in a completely separate building. So right. Something they used to do, I think, the mortuary. I'm trying to remember because I think there was something in the basement where they used to store some of the bodies, mm-hmm. But Trans-Allegheny also grew and expanded a lot over the years it was opened, so it might have been different time periods too. But mm-hmm. There's a specific wing where they used to do like the medical experiments, and then where I was, where the mortuary slab was, mm-hmm. and the refrigerators. That was in a different building. That was right. What they called like the medical building.
Right.
And it was definitely a newer building.
Right.
So I assume when it opened, and to the best of my knowledge, I think when it opened, everything was in that one building, and then they expanded out.
Right. So did you know that Trans-Allegheny, there is a link to the Kennedy family?
I don't think I knew that. What's the link?
It's a bit tenuous, but there is a link. We're talking about lobotomies. I think it's JFK's sister, Rosemary Kennedy, had a lobotomy when she was 23 because she'd been starved of oxygen when she was being born, and apparently was it Joseph Kennedy, her father anyway, decided that she was just getting too unruly because I think she had no sort of inhibitions and all that kind of thing, and she was running off to meet men and decided that wasn't the done thing. So he put her in for a lobotomy with Dr. Walter Freeman and Dr. I think it was James Watts, I think it was his business partner, and he performed the lobotomy on her and basically made her a lot worse than she was, and she ended up being in a facility for the rest of her life. The link is that Walter Freeman actually was the resident neuro expert, for want of a better word, at Trans-Allegheny, and they believe he performed, well, I can't get proper statistics on it, but they said it was in the region of 3,000 to 4,000 lobotomies at Trans-Allegheny, because he found a loophole, because he wasn't a qualified surgeon. It was James Watts who was the qualified surgeon, and Watts refused to carry on working with him because of what he was doing. He actually found a loophole that if you didn't actually anaesthetise the patients, you didn't actually have to be a surgeon. And so what he was meant to do as and it was experimentation, which is why I was interested. You said the medical experiment wing. He would induce a fit by using electroconvulsive therapy on, the electric shock treatment on them to induce a fit, so that then they were almost out of it, so he could do the lobotomy process, because then he wasn't actually anaesthetising them. And that's the link to the Kennedy, because he worked there as well, because he did a lot of work in that whole sort of the Virginia area. But Allegheny was one of his main psychiatric hospitals he did the work in, because he didn't need to have a surgeon's license to go into them. It's absolutely horrifying.
It is horrifying. I mean, because, again, we know that there were people brought to those asylums who really didn't need to be there. Yeah. I mean, you could just drop off your wife if you wanted to, and you didn't really need a reason.
No. Well, in 1951, there was a US study that 60% of lobotomy patients were women. And it was, and it was the husbands who basically said, I can't control her. And then they're like, what? Yeah, seriously.
I most likely would have had a lobotomy if I was that, born in that time period.
Well, in the Victorian era, you could put your wife in an asylum for her being argumentative, for reading too much, for being intelligent, and basically if she refused to have marital relations with you.
It's amazing. It's amazing because, I don't really consider myself religious at all. I don't practice any one thing. I'm more eclectic, more spiritual. But years ago, I was checking out some different institutions just to see if anything really, spoke to me. And one of them was more about education more than anything. And I really appreciated that. And the person, I can't remember her exact title, but she had a PhD in, religious studies. And she came to do a lecture. And I thought it was really interesting because she posed a question, and it's something that always stuck with me because I work with history so much, was that, religions before Christianity and Judaism and Islam came along, most of them really celebrated women. And, you did have your goddesses, and sometimes they were more powerful than the gods. And she said you could see the reflection of that belief system in their culture and their societies. And, I hope this doesn't knock anybody's religious beliefs, but she said, when you start looking though at Christianity and Judaism and Islam, it's a complete reversal of that. And the question she posed was, if that hadn't have happened, would women in today's society be treated differently?
Yeah.
And, it's always been a lecture that stuck with me because, again, I'm in places like Allegheny where I hear these stories and I see the documentation behind them. And it's always something I wonder, It's
a very good, I think you're right. Yes, would be the answer I would give. When you look at some of the ancient races like the Spartans, I think it was the Spartans, who's the women were warriors as well as the men. The women had to protect the town when the men went away. And women were rewarded for being athletic and things like that. And you look at, we talk about Amazon women and all that kind of thing. There are tribes where the women are in charge and it's more of a matriarchal society. So I agree with you, and it is horrifying. I was actually horrified that the statistic that in 1951 60% of lobotomies, I think it was over 60%, were on women. And I would have said a vast majority of those women would have been either dead or left in a persistent vegetative state because of it. Oh,
absolutely. My great aunt had a lobotomy when she was, I believe she was 13. And
13?
13, but she had epilepsy.
Right.
And she was a very bright girl, did very well in school, but she would have seizures from epilepsy. And at the time, they thought lobotomies could cure this. And my grandmother told me the story a couple years ago, just that she remembers her parents sobbing over having to make that decision. Do we do this experimental surgery or do we just, allow her to continue the way she is? And so they elected to do the experimental surgery, which was the lobotomy. And my grandmother said the hole in her head was like the size of your fist. It was like a baseball. That's how big it was. And when she came out, she was about she could function, but she was special needs for the rest of her life. And, you know, and it's just so sad because that she was totally fine in every other way except for the seizures. And, you know, of course, now today, they know how to manage epilepsy much better.
Yeah. It's not seen as a mental illness anymore. It is an actual neurological condition in that respect. Yeah.
Right.
Like dementia. Dementia's another one they used to treat as being a mental illness, but now they know it's a neurological condition. It's not mental illness.
Yeah. So it, you know, I think that was a very sad.
God, it's tragic.
You know, I know she wasn't the only one that has that story. So, it's sad.
Very sad. Very sad. I mean, to be honest, I could talk to you about Allegheny. I mean, we've been chatting for nearly 40 minutes now already. It's so easy to talk to. One of the things I do want to say about Allegheny, in its defence, it wasn't set up to be the place it ended up being. It was set up with very good intentions, under something called the Kirkbride theory, where he had gone in and seen all these places and said, well, they're overcrowded, they've got no fresh air, they can't walk about, there's no almost human rights for them. And he set it up in, I think it was meant to be, 240, 250 people there, maximum. By, I did write down the statistics of the numbers, but I think it was by the 1950s, they had nearly 2,500 residents. And in some of the dorms, the beds were so close, they were less than 2 foot apart. They were sort of head to head, if that makes sense, and then less than 2 foot apart. And if you've got a mental health condition and being crammed in like that, it is not going to help. And it to me, it's no surprise that there was almost what it seems like, looking at the newspapers, a proliferation of killings amongst residents from the 1920s onwards, because they had no respite from each other. They had no freedom. I say I'm not condoning how they were dealt with, but I'm kind of. I wouldn't necessarily. They weren't all bad.
No, not at all. And you know, that's the same. I always remind people of that, and I can't remember which show it was or which episode, but I know a couple episodes I've actually talked about the same exact thing. It's that, you know, these synods start out as bad places, and they weren't intended to be bad places.
No, not at all.
And, you know, the people that worked there didn't have bad intentions, and the people that came there didn't have bad intentions. It just, you know, like anything, I think when something grows out of hand, meaning they don't have the tools and the resources they need to handle the situations that are coming up, you know, then you do have some bad apples that slip in. And I mean that more from, you know, we definitely heard stories from employees that maybe shouldn't have worked in a mental health facility.
Which is life. It happens everywhere, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, it still happens, you know. So, but I think, you know, the saddest part about it to me then, what does that say? It says that we sold, although I think there's been leaps and bounds of progress made in the mental health field. You know, there's still a lot of misconceptions and things that are being, you know, explored so we can get better answers. But it's funny because you do kind of see the same patterns repeated as far as that side of history goes. And, you know, I don't know if people are not willing to realize that mental health is more common than we think. And maybe that's part of the problem where,
Possibly.
you know, funding isn't being allocated where it needs to be allocated. I don't know. You know, I certainly don't have those answers, but it's funny because when you work as an investigator and you're going to these places and you're hearing about the history, you realize it's not so much different from a lot of things that are still happening. No.
I agree. Well, we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to fire some questions at you now, if that's all right.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
How is Batman doing?
Oh, thank you. He's doing really, really well. For anybody that doesn't know, Batman he is my rescue pit mix that we have.
Beautiful. He's so beautiful.
Yeah, he's a sweetheart. And he got diagnosed with cancer before he was 1, so he was just a puppy. So we got him like the best doctors we could find. We live near an Ivy League college, so we got him into a program there. And you know, knock on wood, he's doing very well.
So how old is he now?
He just turned 2.
Oh, he has got such a cute face. He is very, very cute. I've seen him on your Instagram pictures, and I do. You know, I mean, I'm a dog person, so he is. He's got a very snuggly face. He's lovely.
He is a snuggler.
And what else are you up to at the moment?
Lots of work.
You are very busy. I mean, if you knew the amount of emails that have been going backwards and forwards between me and this super lady, it's worth it. But it's you've been very busy, haven't you?
Very, very busy. There's work. I mean, it's, we're filming season 2 of Portals. Mm-hmm. And then I have some other projects going on the side, and then just personal stuff. I expanded my jaw this year, so I've been going through that, and then I'm getting married on top of it. So it's, it's a lot of...
Is that this coming year? This next year?
Very soon. Ooh. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. It's very soon.
But will we get to see some photos on Instagram of the dress or the outfit?
Maybe of the dress. My fiance is a little
shy.
Well, yeah, he just really appreciates his privacy. And I totally respect that.
That's why we girls, we don't care about him. We just want to see your dress.
The dresses, yeah. Well,
the dress and the makeup. That's the hair. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I want to see. Oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for talking to us, Katrina. I do appreciate it. And obviously do catch Katrina on Portals to Hell. So there you have it. 45 minutes of an interview with the absolutely lovely Katrina Weidman. I would say the epitome of professionalism, but also rather wonderful lady, and also the winner of the Silver Best Female Investigator Award with Higgy Pop recently. She should have been gold, shouldn't it? We think so. Team Katrina and all that. Unfortunately, because it was a recording, because as she said in the interview, she's incredibly busy at the moment, and sadly couldn't be live with us tonight, although I know she would have loved to have. She has said if anyone does have any questions for her, do please feel free to put them. If they're in the chat room, I will email them on to her, and if you listen to maybe the show next week or in the new year or something like that, we will get the answers to them for you if you do have any questions. So don't worry, if you do have a question for the lovely Ms. Weidman, just let me know and I will pass them on to her. I have the power. Well, I know we haven't done many new shows the last couple of weeks on Parasearch because the winter lurgy has been, well, let's face it, striking with a vengeance. I'm going to start taking it personally over here at Parasearch Radio. But we are still putting out as many shows as we can, and tomorrow night, as far as I know, it will be the PSH Radio show for you. And next week, we will be back with Haunted Histories, and I'll be talking to my good friend, the amazing Mr. Mike Cavell from Hull. We're going to be talking about murder, so something nice and seasonal for you, nice and festive, Murders of Hull. But that is also because Mike is going to be on a crime programme soon, talking about a famous murder. And no, it's not Crime Watch, and no, I don't believe there's going to be an e-fit of his picture going up there. But we'll hear more about what Mike's up to next week, so next Wednesday, 9 p.m. UK time. But if you can't catch the show live, or if you miss it for any other reason, don't worry. Father Christmas is still going to be coming down your chimney, because you can go over to Spreaker and catch it, download it, listen to it at any time. And if that fails, head on over to YouTube. Make sure you hit like, share and subscribe and all that malarkey. You know the score. You've heard it from Ms. Kerry Greenaway often enough. But just make sure you keep following us and listening to all the new content we've got putting out for you. Well, I hope you all have an absolutely lovely evening or day or whatever it is that you're doing at the moment. But don't forget to sleep tight and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.